Welcome back to the Bad Beat Podcast. I'm your host, Robert Eisenstadt. Today we have a real treat in the studio. This is very important to me. We have Mr. Cole Hatter. He was a firefighter turned missionary, turned real estate investor, and motivational speaker. This is actually really important to me and hopefully a lot of you. So thank you for taking the time to join me during your business trip, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, bro. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So before we jump into your story, I want to touch base on something because the entire reason this podcast studio is here has a lot to do with you.
All right.
So I went to Clever Summit, which was a real estate conference. I had no idea who you were. I didn't know who Cody was. I didn't know who anybody was. And the energy that you had on stage was just absolutely insane. And the first day I was like, man, I got to talk to this guy. The second day, I said the same thing to myself numerous times, but, you know, I think a lot of times we're very nervous to walk up to somebody that we don't know and just be outgoing and ask questions,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
And there was probably like 20 people surrounding you, and I walked up to you and I said, hey, I don't know who you are. I know nothing about you. I just know that I need to talk to you. I don't know if you remember this. I said, I'm willing to fly anywhere at any time. I just want to sit down and have a conversation with you. And you like stopped, looked at me, and you were like, why don't you come to my cabana tomorrow? And I was like, okay. So I came down to your cabana, which was really awkward for me at first.
Yeah.
But I ended up making some really good connections with
Legacy
and Chris Ford.
Yeah.
And dude, that conversation was like the single reason that this podcast happened. That's the first time I ever told my life story to anybody. We were all crying over a cigar.
Yeah.
And this happened. But I wanted to ask you, what was the reason that you accepted letting me in? Because I know it's hard for people to come into your space, right?
Yeah. So I don't remember you coming up to me. I obviously remember you being at the cabana the next day. I also remember that I was completely fried and had nothing left in the tank. So we were trying to hang out and I was just like a vegetable. So sorry if I wasn't as talkative as normal. So I can't speak to why because I don't remember that night. And no offense to you, when you're at an event of 2,500 people, I had 2,500 conversations that weekend. But something about you had to have stood out because I didn't invite anyone else to my cabana. And I mean, other than people who I invited intentionally,
right.
But no other random person that walked up to me at the event got the invite. And so whatever you shared with me, whatever your energy was at the time was something that I said, hey, I think I can help this guy. And whatever your journey is, wanting to fly and go anywhere, you obviously showed motivation. And so I was like, okay. You know what's funny is a lot of times I'll reciprocate and people don't do anything. So like, for instance, I would invite you to the cabana and you would no show.
Right.
So good for you for even coming. You said it was awkward. I'm glad you showed up anyway. But you know, it's just something had to have been said or communicated to you by me. It might have even just been your body language. It might have been just your energy where I was like, this guy's cool. I'll give him my time.
Right. Awesome, man. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. That single-handedly changed my life.
That's cool.
It put me on a trajectory, you know, of mindset and motivation and all these things, doing uncomfortable things that really push you over the edge. You know what I mean? I mean, that night I spoke in front of Robert Kiyosaki and Cody at what was the club that you guys rented out? Hakkasan. So it was really amazing, and I just wanted to take the small amount of time to thank you for that.
Yeah.
Before we jumped into your story, so I've heard your story a few times, and it's motivated me. Actually, every time I've heard your story, I've gotten emotional, which is awesome. But I want to back up. You became a firefighter at what age?
19.
Okay, what made you want to become a firefighter?
God put it on my heart to help people, bro. I was probably 13, 14 years old, and I grew up in the church, and some of my favorite memories were when we would go down to Mexico for a weekend and build a house for homeless families or just, you know, contribution. And so as I started seriously considering a career, you know, when you're 5 years old, you want to be an astronaut or whatever, right? But at like 14, 15, I was like, okay, what do I actually want to do? I was trying to find something that made me feel good. And so I remembered going down to Mexico and just the philanthropic work that I'd done. And I was like, where can I get paid to help people? So I thought about joining our military. I thought about being a doctor. I was just intimidated by 400 years of school. I thought about being a police officer, but I had a little trouble with the law, so I thought maybe that's not the best match. And then firefighting just made a lot of sense to me. If I can save lives, play with fire, get paid for it, have all the off time and the flexibility of schedule, it just made a lot of sense. So it was a vehicle where I felt that I would be compensated to do what makes me happy. I didn't want a career I would hate. Sitting in a cubicle under, fluorescent lights would have never worked for me. And so So that's what made me do firefighting. So I just wanted to help people, and I needed a career where I could do that. And again, I thought about joining a nonprofit or starting one, all kinds of things, but firefighting was what I picked.
How long did you do it for?
2 years, 19 to 21.
And so when you were 21, what made you stop?
The car accident.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's jump into that. So the car accident, what were the events leading up to that point? Like, what were you guys doing before the car accident happened? And then I want to jump into what actually happened that night.
Yeah, so there were 3 of us in the accident, Steve, myself, and Matt, and the 3 of us were best buds. So what we had been doing up leading to that, we were 21-year-olds, and so, whatever 21-year-olds do, we loved dirt biking, we loved surfing, we loved the beach, we were just boys. Matt and I met at about 19 years old and just instantly broed out and were 2 peas out of a pod. Steve and I grew up together, so the 3 of us were pretty inseparable. We were best buds. And, we had all turned 21. Matt turned 21 first in November. Then I turned 21 in April. And then Steve turned 21 in May. And so we were finally all legally the age to come to Vegas and gamble and drink. Not that I had never done that before with a fake ID,
right.
But finally, like for the first time in my life, I could do it without looking over my shoulder. I could walk right into any club I wanted, throw my ID down and didn't have to worry about them, bending it and putting it in the little machine and being like, this is bogus, get out of here. And so we decided to go out to Vegas that September. It was the first time that all of us were available. And so we just wanted to go out to Vegas and do the 21-year-old thing. The 3 of us were going to share one room. We're all broke and 21-year-old kids. And we were just going to hang for the weekend. It was just a Vegas boys trip to celebrate our 21st birthday together.
I miss those days.
Yeah, right? When things were simple.
Okay, so you guys came out to Vegas. You guys made it to Vegas, right?
No, we didn't.
Oh, it was on the way here.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so what happened?
So we are 37 miles on this side of Barstow. So we had driven at, a couple of hours, 2 hours or so. We were in the middle of nowhere. It's just sticks, rocks, and coyotes out there. And I don't remember any of the accident. I've lost my, I don't have any memory of it or recollection for probably about 3 weeks after the accident is just all blank. But what the police report said happened was that we were in the fast lane. There was a car in the slow lane. And as we were approaching to pass, they didn't see us in the blind spot, turned into our lane and made contact. Their back left with our front right connected. And we started flipping end over end. And I was ejected. Steve was ejected. Matt was not. Matt got really banged up. He got rushed back to Barstow Regional, which was about a half an hour ride in an ambulance, but he was stable. He was conscious and was just, needed stitches and he had a concussion. But Steve and I were completely screwed up. We both got ejected at 80 miles an hour.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So, the speed limit out there is 75.
Yeah,
so
we
were doing 80. And so they shut down the freeway in both directions. The 15 freeway completely shut it down. And they landed a helicopter in the middle of the road and they flew me and Steve back to Southern California to Arrowhead Regional where the trauma team was waiting to work on us. And they rolled us into the operating room and started working on Steve and started working on me. And so no, to your question, we never made it to Vegas.
Damn, dude. So, you said Matt was the one that just needs stitches, right?
Yeah, so Matt gets rushed to Arrowhead Regional. Steve and I get airlifted. And, the rest of the story goes that, like I said, I don't remember any of it, but I do have one memory. And it was waking up in my hotel bed. I just opened my eyes and my parents were sitting down past my feet in the chairs in my hotel room, or my hospital room, excuse me. I was not in a hotel. Hospital. And so again, no recollection. Imagine right now we're having this conversation. You wake up in a hospital with your parents at your feet of your bed. It's like, wait, what? Why am I in a hospital? And why are you here? And right. And I didn't even remember that we were going to Vegas. So it wasn't like I was like, hey, I'm supposed to be in Vegas right now. Like I was completely confused because I had massive brain trauma. And so was completely confused. But this is my only memory God gave me is I'm sitting there and I ask my mom and dad, like, what happened? They're like, you got in an accident. It's like a car accident. I don't even remember driving a car. And my mom's like, no, you weren't driving. Steve was driving, you and Matt, and you guys were going out to Vegas, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, where's Steve and where's Matt? And my mom and dad got a little bit quiet. And they're like, oh, well, Matt's not here. He's in a different hospital. Steve's in a different part of the hospital that you're in. And I'm like, okay, well, I want to go to Steve right now. And my mom's like, I'm sorry, honey, you can't go to Steve. And I was like, well, why not? And I could just see it in my mom's face that something was wrong. And she's like, they're getting him ready for surgery. And I said, well, surgery? Well, what kind of surgery does he need, Mom? And she said, they're getting him ready for an organ transplant. And I looked at my mom in the face and I said, whatever he needs, he can have mine. I was like, this is my brother. Take me to him right now. I want to save Steve. And my mom said, honey, you don't understand. He doesn't need anything. They're going to donate his kidneys. He's not going to survive. And I was crushed. And I just told my mom, I was like, take me to Steve right now. And the hospital staff was super accommodating. I started throwing a fit. So the nurses come in, what's going on? I was like, take me to Steve, take me to him right now. And so they were kind enough to accommodate me. They moved me out of my hotel, or I keep saying hotel. They moved me out of my hospital bed into a wheelchair because I couldn't walk. They threw my IVs and all my stuff in my lap, and they wheeled me into Steve's room where I got to see him as the surgeons were prepping him for surgery. They wheeled me next to him, and I held his hand for about 35 minutes. And I just sat there looking at him, holding him. And then they finally said, Cole, it's time to say goodbye. We have to start the surgery now to preserve his organs for the donor. You have to say goodbye. You have to let go. And it was very, very hard for me. And so I said my goodbyes. They pulled me into the hall to take me back to my room. And this is where my memory ends, was with my surgeon that worked on me when I had arrived, because this was like days later now that I woke up. When I arrived, the surgeon that worked on me just happened to be on shift right there and saw me in the hall. And so he kneeled down and he introduced himself, and he had heard that Steve wasn't going to make it. So he knew, the situation that I was dealing with. And he just kneeled down, he introduced himself, and he had tears coming down his cheeks, and he apologized for my loss. And he's like, I'm so sorry that you're losing your friend right now. And he's like, but I just want you to know, as your surgeon, there's no medical explanation as to why you survived. He's like, I've seen people with way less injuries than you come in here and they don't leave. And he's like, the fact that you're awake right now defies medicine. And he's like, and he just pointed up and he said, somebody up there must have a plan for you because you should not be here today. And that's the last of my memory. I don't remember the next 3 weeks. And so lost Steve on September 10th, 2004. And it was hard to lose a best friend. Anybody listening to this podcast right now or watching can understand what it would feel like to get the call that your best friend had been killed in a car accident. So I had all the understandable grief around that. But what really was hurting me was the soul-crushing guilt of surviving. I didn't just get the phone call that my best friend had passed. I was on the trip with him. I was in the car with him. I got ejected with him and was lying next to him on the freeway while other cars swerved around us right after the accident, right? I was in the helicopter with him. I was in the operating room next to him. He had his own surgical team. I had mine, and we were in the same OR. Everything was the same except I left and he didn't. And it was really hard for me to process. And so the guilt was, like I said, soul-crushing of being the survivor of that accident.
Jesus.
And Matt really understood because he went through that too. I have massive respect for our military, so I certainly don't try to take any of their valor in this next comment. But really the only people that understand what that guilt feels like are men and women who have served our country, who have gone into a battle, and their brothers in arms that they've gone through boot camps with and done life with don't come out of the battle. They do. And it's just a weird, eerie feeling that Matt and I had where there were 3 of us and now there's just 2 of us. And he understood what that feeling felt like. And again, I've had this conversation many times with military who have told me that they can relate to what I'm talking about. Again, that's not to, I never served in the military. I went the firefighter route. I have the highest level of respect for our military. But yeah, so it was just really, really hard to figure out to process why I was here and he was gone.
Did that take a long time?
Well, sort of.
Or are you still going through it?
Yeah, I'm still going through it. But then there was the next accident, right? And so it got exacerbated pretty bad in about 66 days.
So I want to jump into that in a second, but dude, I mean, I'm trying to hold back from getting emotional here. So you lose your friend and you're in the hospital for how long after you find out that he's not going to make it? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was about a day or so after that they let me go home. I was stable. I was bandaged head to toe. I had lost so much skin. When you hit the pavement at 80 miles an hour, you lose a lot of skin. So they were actually treating me like a burn victim, even though I wasn't in a fire. I lost enough skin that I needed treatment that a burn patient would. Yeah, exactly. And so I was sent home to my parents' house. I had to move back in with mom and dad because I was so hurt I couldn't care for myself. They had to completely carry me to the toilet type care and change all my wounds and my bandages and things like that. But I was released about a day or 2 after I found out about Steve, excuse me.
What injuries did you have?
So I had a subdural hematoma. I had a brain bleed. I had a spinal contusion, which was in my lumbar section. So I was temporarily paralyzed from the waist down and a lot of road rash. Surprisingly, I didn't break a bone. Steve broke almost every bone in his body. which is why he didn't make it. And out of all of his organs, only his kidneys were still intact enough to be donated. All of his other major organs were failing from the trauma of the accident. So he obviously got it a lot worse than I did. But somehow, some way, I pulled out. And so I again, had that brain injury. And I was blind in one eye for about a year after that accident as my brain healed. And then had to learn how to walk again and was in a wheelchair for a while because of my spinal cord injury. So it's a spinal contusion is like a bruise on your spinal cord. As the bruising goes away, the nerves re-engage, I guess, I'm not a doctor, and start working again, which was great that I didn't break my spinal cord. By breaking my back, I just bruised it. And so spinal contusion caused me some hell for a while, but praise God, I'm 100% through it. I still have back issues, but I just jogged 5 miles today in your beautiful heat here in Vegas. So
yeah, it's hot, dude.
I got my legs back.
That was my next question. Actually, was like, how has it, not necessarily hurt, but how has that affected your life physically to this day? But I mean, dude, I see you running every single day. You're working out almost every single day.
Yeah.
Is that a lot harder for you? Do you think that it holds you back in any kind of sense, but you're just so mentally strong that you push through it? Or
yeah, no, a little bit. The accident was now a long time ago, so I've healed for the most part. I do have lower back problems, and so when I run a lot, my back's screwed up. But just general maintenance, chiropractor, massages, and stuff like that, it's fine. So I don't have any long-term ailments from those accidents. Again, praise God, I had a full recovery.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I do get a lot of headaches. Still, I have a bruise on my brain from where the accident, from the injury site. I had to get an MRI 3 or 4 years ago, and you can still see perfectly in my brain where the injury site was. It's scarred.
Really?
Yeah. So that scar tissue causes some chronic headaches. But other than headaches and back pain, I'm fine. I'll take it. I got to live.
Yeah, dude. You are 100% here for a reason. I mean, you've impacted so many lives, and which I want to jump into the next incident, which was 66 days later, which is so crazy. So you're in your parents' house, you're trying to heal mentally and physically. You're going through the notions and trying to get through this, which I can't imagine how hard it was. Being stuck in a house and grieving and physically trying to heal. And then I think it was Matt, right, came over.
So Matt was coming over pretty regularly because, again, he and I had just survived that accident together. We had just grieved and lost Steve together. So Matt and I became very inseparable. I mean, we were already best buds, but going through something like that accident creates a connection, right? So like Matt and I had just this understanding that no one else could relate to. Everyone else was empathetic and sympathetic to our situation, but I knew Matt knew what I was going through, right? So we would hang out. I was going through gnarly depression for a few reasons. My career in firefighting was suddenly over. I'm back living at my parents' house. I had no autonomy. I couldn't even use the restroom when I needed to go. Like I had to wait for someone to come and carry me so like my life changed dramatically. It wasn't just the loss of Steve. I lost a lot in that accident. Right. And so Matt was there to be my boy and have my back, just like a best friend would. Well, 66 days after my accident, I got out of my wheelchair and onto crutches. And to celebrate kind of the graduation of getting onto crutches, Matt was like, hey, let's go ride our dirt bikes. Because like you asked about earlier, that was one of the things that we used to love to do. And I was like, what do you mean dirt bikes, bro? I can hardly walk. And he's like, that's the point. You sit on a dirt bike. I'm not asking you to go for a jog. I'm asking you to go ride a dirt bike. So I was like, you know what? Screw it. Let's go. He was just trying to get me to get back into my old routines. He was trying to help pull me out of my depression. And so I said, let's go. The parents agreed. Matt loaded up my stuff and his stuff in the truck, and we went out to the desert in Southern California near our homes. And we're riding our dirt bikes real slow. I mean, I was like second, third gear, 20 miles an hour, right? Just putting around. But it was effective. I was feeling better. We were laughing and we were enjoying ourselves, and, mission accomplished. Matt got me off the couch and out and doing things again. And so we were on our final ride. We had enough, and we were like, hey, let's go back to camp, pack up the bikes and go home. Matt was first. I was behind him. And he climbed this incline, like this little hill, and he got to the top of it. And when you're at the bottom of the hill, you can only see the edge. You can't see what's on the top. So he disappeared, and I was like, oh, that looks like fun. I'll follow him up there. Followed him up the hill. He had just climbed maybe 40 seconds before me. And when I got to the top of that hill, there was no top. It was just a huge hole. It was a 20 by 10 foot hole, and I fell in. And as I was falling into the hole, I was able to reach out and grab onto a bush that was on the edge of the hole about the size of a basketball and just hang onto it with my left arm, looking straight down into complete blackness. My bike fell in, the whole deal. So I grabbed the bush with my other hand, was able to kind of pull myself up to my armpits and roll out of the hole. Remember, I'm still on crutches, so
Right.
I was not able to get up and start running around. I was sitting by the hole, and I'm yelling down to Matt because I don't know if my bike fell on top of him. I don't know if he fell like 30 feet. Like, I have no idea how deep this hole is. So I'm yelling at him to try to see if he's okay and to go find a rope and call 911, and he wasn't answering. So I called 911. The search and rescue team showed up. They set up all of their equipment to be able to rappel down the hole to go find Matt. And in the meantime, I called his mom and dad, obviously. I called my mom and dad, my youth pastor, Brian, Steve, who I had just lost 66 days earlier. I called his mom and dad, called everybody out there. Because of all the police activity, some of the news vans got out there, and there's just probably a group of 30 standing around this hole. And the fire department search and rescue was doing their thing. And it literally took them 7 hours, 6.5 to 7 hours. And they weren't giving us a bunch of information. We would see them go down and come back up, go down and come back up. And we're like, what is going on right now? And they're like, just stand by. We'll give you an update soon. And I was getting pissed. Well, finally, 7 hours later, it's like 10 p.m. now. The police chaplain said, hey, I need to speak to the family. And I was like, all right, I'm family. Let's go. So he pulled us away from the news reporters and from the crowd that was there. And it was Matt's mom and dad. It was my mom and dad, my youth pastor, Brian, and Steve's mom and dad. It was just the 7 of us standing there. And he said, this is an abandoned mine shaft. What you guys fell into is a mine shaft. And a company came in here and they dug out all the silver and all the gold, and they left the mine shaft abandoned. He said, unfortunately, sometimes when people fall into these mine shafts, there are so many canals once you're in it that sometimes people can fall into one of these like dig outs and will never find their bodies ever. He's like, that's part of what took so long to find Matt, is we were checking everything as we continued to go down. He said, the problem is this is the deepest mine shaft he had ever seen in his career. It was 780 feet deep. Matt fell all the way to the bottom and he didn't survive. So I lost Steve on September 10th. I lost Matt on November 14th. Steve, Matt, and I were in the car accident. There were 3 of us, and then there was just 2 of us, me and Matt. Matt and I fall into a mine shaft 66 days later, and it's just me. And to your point earlier, you were saying, something about the healing of the grief and the guilt, and how long did that take? Well, it got a lot worse losing Steve. And then 66 days later, losing Matt didn't help. And so my 2 best friends in the world were gone in accidents that I was in. So when I was talking about that soul-crushing grief earlier, or guilt, the guilt was unbearable that my 2 best friends were gone, and that I should have been dead. The doctor at the hospital that did surgery on me said literally that I shouldn't have survived the surgeries. I shouldn't have survived the accident, and that it's a miracle that I'm alive. When it comes to the mine shaft, if I would have been just 6 more inches to the right, bro, or if I was leaning to the right and just had a little bit more momentum that way, I wouldn't have been able to reach the bush. I would have fallen in after Matt, and we would have become missing people. Our parents would have eventually found our camp where his truck was parked, but they wouldn't have seen either of our dirt bikes or us because we would have both fallen in this hole. They would have never known where to check. We would have literally been missing people for the last 17 years. But because I was 6 inches to the left, I was able to grab that bush and save myself.
Fuck, dude, that's so crazy.
Yeah. And so both friends gone. And I'm a 21-year-old kid. Still living at home with my parents recovering from the car accident.
I don't understand what you meant, like personally, as far as being able to bond with these people. But I did have a previous guest that was a Navy SEAL, and something he said to me really resonated with what you just said. It's really hard for him to let people into his life and make genuine connections with new people because they don't know the real him, right? They haven't gone through insane hardships with these people to see them at their absolute lowest point in their life and help them get through that and build them back up.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a lot of the reason why a lot of, these SEAL teams are so immensely just close with each other, because they've gone through hell and they've been at the top together. Right. Yeah. Do you think that you also have a hard time letting people in to your life now because of those situations?
100%. Yeah. And I have other loss. Those are just two people I lost. In my 20s, I've lost more than most, but I was also blessed more than most. And so I definitely still to this day am guarded. I have a lot of really incredible friends, but almost like wanting to honor Steve and Matt. There's no person that kind of filled their roles still to this day. And yeah, I in my career am in a place where I meet a lot of people like you all the time, right? When I'm here in Vegas because I'm speaking at an event of 1,000 people right now. I'll be on stage tomorrow. I'll get off stage just like you. When you found me, I'll be bombarded by 50 people. And so I get a chance to meet a lot of people, but I am almost always very guarded around building relationships with them. I'm fine having conversations with anybody, but like going deep and creating a bond and creating life experiences with people is something that even still to this day, I don't want to say I struggle with it, but I'm very guarded.
How do you get through that though?
I don't know. And I don't know that it's necessarily a negative thing. I don't know that I would have more friendships, I guess. I don't know. Because I've gone to therapy a ton after losing Steve and Matt. Like, I've gone through therapy. I'm still in therapy, not necessarily for Steve and Matt, but I'm just a huge fan of investing in mental health. I think that we all invest in gym memberships for physical health, but people think that having a therapist is taboo and you're a weirdo or whatever. So I still meet with a therapist on Zoom every other week. But so I went through therapy and I processed it and I thought about that, and it's just kind of who I've become. I think that some life experiences temporarily impact us and some impact us for the rest of our lives. And losing Steve and Matt impacted me for the rest of my life. And I might be a bit more charismatic, more open, more friendly if I hadn't lost them. But I don't necessarily see my guardedness costing me opportunity or relationships. It's probably just more irritating for people like you that would want to go hang out and go build a friendship. And I'm like, nah, I'm just going to go to my hotel room and work on something instead.
Yeah. Well, so what would you tell, like, in the space that you're in now, what would you tell an older version of yourself? So, and what I mean by that is, let's say somebody just went through a horrible accident and they were involved in it, but they had lost somebody and they lived. What would you tell an older version of yourself on how to push through it?
Everything happens for a reason. You can't see the chapters ahead in your book that is your life. You can only see the chapter you're in and the ones you've read. So it makes no sense, but 2 or 3 chapters ahead, you'll see that good can come from it. I would do anything to get Steve and Matt back. If God gave me a choice, I would have never let them die, but it happened. That was God's plan for their lives and for mine. And I just have to trust that there was a reason in it. And I have then spent the rest of my life since those accidents applying meaning to their deaths by doing what I do. This podcast right now is 100% happening because of Steve and Matt. And I can show lots of lives. I don't even know how many, but lots of lives that have been changed now because of their lives. And that's what I promised them I would do. I had a really dark moment on December 18th. So I lost again Matt on November 14th. A month later, December 18th was when I had my kind of aha moment and realized that I was being a victim and that I needed to take my depression and use it for motivation for good and stop feeling sorry for myself. And so did that. And, since that moment have absolute certainty that I'm going to have to ask God why I let 21-year-olds die when I get to heaven. Like that just, I can't put reason to that, but I can show because of their deaths so much good that's come. And so back to your question, what I would tell a younger version of myself is while you're in the chapter you're in, you have no idea how it's going to make sense in the chapters that come. Hang in there. Everything happens for a reason. And if you choose to, you can use this thing, whatever it is, to fuel you for all kinds of good, whatever that good would be. I mean, my loss of Steve and Matt has fueled me to make tens of millions of dollars, right? I've been successful in business because of them. I would have been a firefighter if I hadn't gotten that car accident for 30, 35 years, put in my retirement and been done in my 50s, right?
Yep.
I'm literally an entrepreneur because of that loss. Again, who knows what my life would have looked like if Steve and Matt were still here. Maybe I would have gotten bored of the fire department, quit, and started my own business anyway. But I know for sure that being in a wheelchair and not being able to walk and knowing that firefighting was over at that time was what pushed me into entrepreneurship. I didn't know how well I would heal. I didn't know what brain injury long-term, if I would have learning problems. I didn't know any of that. And so the one thing I did know was I needed to learn how to make money all by myself. And so that's what pushed me into entrepreneurship was I don't know how hireable I'll be. This is what I was thinking at the time, right? Being injured, like possibly being
This is the aha moment?
Yeah, this was me choosing my new career. This was after the aha moment.
Gotcha.
was, do I just want to rehab and go back to firefighting? And why I went into entrepreneurship was because, again, I didn't know how well I would heal. And so I wanted to learn how to provide for myself, and I didn't want someone else to pay me any money. I wanted, I didn't want an employer to be like, Cole, based on your value, here's your paycheck. I wanted to learn how to make money by myself as a result of losing Steve and Matt and being injured.
So it's like a second aha moment.
Yeah, I guess so.
So what was your first venture into entrepreneurship?
Flipping houses.
Yeah.
I started looking now. So I'm 21. I'm living at my parents' house, and I started looking at my limited network at that time. And what I found is that all wealthy people did real estate. They might have been a doctor and made their money in medicine, but they stuck their money in real estate. And so the one thing that every wealthy person that I had access to at the time, right? I didn't have a big network, but of the people I talked to that I thought were rich at the time, because I'm a broke 21-year-old living at my parents' house, recovering from accidents, they all had real estate in their lives. They either did it in real estate full time. My parents' next door neighbor was a real estate broker. He had beautiful Mercedes Benz, and he lived in a 3,200 square foot house with views and stuff. As my parents' next door neighbor, and I was just like, screw it. If wealthy people do real estate, I'll do real estate. And here I am 17 later still doing it. I do a lot more than just real estate now, but it's been my core functioning business that keeps the lights on at my house for 17 years now.
Well, and I mean, you got a lot going on though. You got Thrive, you have real estate, you have, you're a motivational speaker. Yeah. So, I mean, you've jumped into so many different streams of income. 23
restaurants now, 140 acre CBD farm. I mean, I've invested in a lot. A bunch of tech companies. Yeah.
Well, so, and you say everything happens for a reason. All of these unfortunate incidents had to happen to create these opportunities. Yeah. Right. And I mean, that's pretty much the basis of this show. You've had to go through a lot of hard things, but jumping into entrepreneurship after going through all of these hard losses, were you by yourself a lot of times trying to teach yourself things, or did you have mentors? Did you find mentors, or
both? So I've been self-employed now for 18 years. That's how long it's been since the accidents. And at the early stages, I was school of hard knocks, self-taught. I didn't have money for mentors. I didn't even know there was such a thing as mentors. I thought that you went to school to learn stuff. I didn't realize that you could pay someone to teach you what they know and cut that learning curve dramatically. So at first it was a lot of school of hard knocks. Luckily for me, the accidents were in 2004. So I started my business in 2005. And I don't know if you remember what real estate was doing in 2005, but it was booming. Stated income, stated asset loans. I was 21, so I was young, but I was old enough to participate in the real estate game. And so I just went all in and went crazy on it. And I have no regrets of leaving the fire department and doing this full time. The entrepreneur stuff. But yeah, I think that I needed a vehicle to apply myself. So part of my aha moment, that one on December 18th, was I promised Steve and Matt that I would live a life big enough for the three of us. I said, you guys were only given 21 years. And so I'm going to do the rest with however many more years God gives me. I might die at 30. I might die at 40. We have no idea. But however much more time I got than you guys, I'm going to make it count. And I needed a vehicle to be able to do something that mattered in. And for me, that's business. That's entrepreneurship.
Yep. And you are all about making money matter.
Yeah.
You have an orphanage in Mexico, which started by you being a missionary, correct?
Yes.
So tell like a smaller version of how you became a missionary. I think it's hilarious, but
yeah. So real estate was booming, like I said, in 2005. It was easy to make money when I started my business. 2008, I got my ass kicked by the recession. And back to your question of like mentorship or whatever. I didn't use mentors and still made money because real estate was easy to make money in 2005. Well, in 2008, because I had no real knowledge and no mentorship, when real estate became hard to make money because it was crashing, we had the subprime implosion and we were in a full-blown recession, a financial crisis, I didn't know how to make money anymore. And so I would flip a house and lose money. I would have to go to the closing table and write a check instead of leaving with a check. And so I'd make money on 2 or 3, lose money on 1 or 2, make money on 2 or 3, lose money on 1 or 2. And I was slowly hemorrhaging. You go broke slowly and then all at once, they say. And so by the spring of 2010, after 2 years of hitting my head against a brick wall, I finally had enough. And I told my dad, dude, he was my business partner at the time. I said, Dad, I'm out. You can have my half of the business. I can't do this anymore. My girlfriend at the time dumped me on Cinco de Mayo, which is just messed up. You don't break up on, wait the next, let me have my tacos and my tequila, do it the next day. But she dumped me and on Cinco de Mayo. And so here I am waking up the morning of May 6th. I'm single. I had just quit my own business. I was had like $30,000 left to my name, and that was it, like nothing. And so I said, screw it. I said to Steve and Matt that I would honor their lives, and I tried to do it in business and I failed. So now I'm going to go do it in missions work. So I joined a nonprofit organization called Youth with a Mission, YWAM. I moved to Ensenada, Mexico, and I became a full-time missionary where I was living off of my savings and supporting myself down there and just giving back. My job was to build houses for homeless families. And the summer that I was down there, we built 37 houses for homeless families. And we were working a lot with the poverty community of Mexico, which, I mean, if you think there's poverty in America, you should see some of these colonias in Mexico, right? Like no electricity, no water, no floors. There's just dirt floors, like dirt. They go and collect trash and use trash to make huts and live in these things. And so we would take down their huts and build a house in its place, like a 16 by 20 foot house. While I was living down there doing that is when I ended up starting my orphanage. I did not move to Mexico to start the orphanage. God just called me when I was down there to do it, and I did. And I still have that orphanage to this day. And so back to your comment around making money matter. Once I had 11 kids at my orphanage, my money was going quick. And I remember I only had about $30,000 when I got down there. Well, now it's 7 months later and I had a few $1,000s left. And so I was like, dude, these kids are now relying on me. I can't afford to keep them here. I got to go back to America, start a nonprofit and raise support. Find people like yourself who do well financially and say, hey, Robert, would you give me $100 a month so that I can just take care of these kids and you keep crushing business in Vegas, but just know that you are supporting these children. And that was my first thought. But the entrepreneur in me had a problem with asking people for money without any service or goods, right? To just, hey, just donate to me out of the goodness of your heart. Right. I'd rather sell you something. So I was racking my brain on how to generate the money I needed to feed my children at my orphanage. And right about that time, Tom's Shoes was getting big. Have you heard of Tom's Shoes?
Yeah.
For every pair of shoes they sold, they gave a pair away. And because they had such a unique giving model, they got so much PR and press for free because people wanted to talk about them and helped blow them up. Well, I'd heard about him and I was like, that's what I need to do. This Blake Mikowski guy, the founder of Tom's, he knows what he's talking about. I'm going to go back to America and I'm going to start businesses like that. Instead of starting a nonprofit, I'll start businesses that don't just make money, they make money matter. And that's what I said. And so I moved back to America. I restarted my fix and flip. This is now 2011. So I lived down there from June of 2010 through February of 2011. That girl that dumped me, I got her back and I married her. We now have 3 beautiful babies. So wifey was crazy for a second. She dumped me, but I ended up getting her back. And so asked that girl that dumped me to marry me. She said yes. Restarted my real estate business, but this time a portion of every dollar I would earn for the rest of my life would go towards supporting my orphanage or some other cause I care about. And that is the Make Money Matter version. And that's how I ended up being a missionary.
It's amazing. And for you guys that are watching, you guys can go and actually check out, would it be on Thrive social media or your personal social media? Because I know you've gotten a lot of content of you bringing your mastermind group down there and actually helping build those houses and feeding the kids and all that stuff. Where can people check that out? And if they want to donate?
MakeMoneyMatter.org.
MakeMoneyMatter.org.
Yeah, so I coined the phrase Make Money Matter. I named my nonprofit that I have with my wife and one of our best friends, Danny. It's called MakeMoneyMatter.org. And if people want to learn more about what I do down there, check it out.
Yeah, it's amazing, man. I think you're helping so many people. I've personally donated to it, and I think a lot of other people should too. It's just really moving seeing you go through such a hard time in life and being knocked down consistently, having all of these odds put against you, and now you're helping change so many other people's lives, including mine. Yeah, I mean, you've been a huge motivational person in my life, and I know so many others. So I have so much respect for you.
Thanks, bro.
Yeah. So you've gone through all these things. You've gone through all these hardships in your life. Where are you going next? Like what is your next move? What's your plan?
So I'm writing a book. Everyone who hears my story, because again, we only covered the Steve and Matt part. As I mentioned maybe 20 minutes ago, I've gone through hell in my 20s and part of my 30s. And so I'm writing a book that is basically some of my life stories, obviously losing Steve and Matt and just some of the things I've gone through, but the lessons that I learned from them. So it's going to be like a memoir self-help where it's not just telling my story, it's telling as little of my story as I need to give the context for the lesson. And it'll be entrepreneurial, the book. And so I want to get it out there because my wife said something to me the other day. She's like, hey, let's hope you live 100 years. But if you die today, your story dies with you and your story changes people's lives. Your story impacts people's lives. And it gets me emotional. My wife she's just like has my back. I married the right woman, and I'm so grateful for that. And so she's the one that motivated me to finally write my book. And so I'm going the traditional route. I've got a publisher. I'm going to, be in Barnes & Noble, the whole deal. I'm not doing the self-published route. I want it to have as much reach as possible. And that's a big thing that I'm working on. Thrive has been on a 1.5 year hiatus, as you know. We did our last event in 2021, took off 2022 for me to work on some real estate projects and just some things that were overwhelming me. We're going to take this year off as well, but we're going to bring Thrive back in the fall of 2024. So I'm going to start working on that in the next couple of months of securing a venue. And even though it's not going to happen for another 16 months, you got to secure venues that far out in advance. And so I'll be working on bringing Thrive back. And then just my family, bro. I'm really aware of the time that I have with my little kids. I see people post stuff on social media that says things like, when your kids are 12 years old, you've already spent 75% of the time you'll ever spend with them in their entire lives. Because when they're children, they live with you. And then when they're adults, they don't live with you. And you see them hours a month instead of hours a day. Right now, I get to see my kids hours every single day. Once they're adults and have their own children, I'll see them hours every month if I'm lucky, right? How often do you see your parents? And so when you're an adult, right? And so I'm so aware of that I'm leaning so hard into fatherhood right now. I'm turning down opportunities and even sold some assets that were taking too much time from me so that I can be a full-time dad. I'm bringing my little boy into the world now. I've got my 2 beautiful little girls. My wife and I were done. We had a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I sat down in the kitchen with her one night, and I was like, I want one more. And she's like, you seriously want to start the clock over? Our 6-year-old's pretty much self-sustaining at this point. I mean, not self-sustaining, but, no diapers, none of that anymore. But we started the clock over, and now I've got a beautiful little 10-month-old boy. And so I'm just leaning heavily. So finally, to answer your question, I'm writing my book. I'm bringing Thrive back. I'm doing all of my other responsibilities, and I'm leaning heavy into fatherhood. I'm a coach on both my daughters' soccer teams. How
do you, and this is just from my personal knowledge, because this is actually something that I struggle with. I run numerous businesses, and I feel a lot of guilt when I'm like going to these events or working a lot of time and I'm not getting to spend that time with my daughter. And I know that you are an extremely busy person.
Yeah.
How do you find that balance?
There's no such thing. It is a work in progress. And so I think the analogy that comes to mind is think of like a clock, right? Think of the dials of a clock and the hands of on the clock, and what are the analog clock? And think about like where the 10 is and the 2 is. Let's say that balance is noon.
Right.
You should just shoot to stay between the 10 and the 2. Because there are seasons, like right now, I'm in Las Vegas. My family's in Orange County. I missed my wife too much, so I just put her on a flight. She lands today at 10. Today at 5, and leaves tomorrow at 11. She's literally just going to go out to dinner with me and a show tonight, and then leaves again in the morning.
She's a beast.
Dude, she's so rad. Well, she's my CEO of Thrive, and so she's, I have to not just have a wife, but she's a boss in one of my businesses too. So she's coming out here. But back to your question, I don't think that there is work-life balance. I think that that's why it's such a prominent conversation in the entrepreneurial communities, is because no one can figure out how to do it. But it's awareness that matters. And it's me realizing that I lean too heavily into business sometimes, so I have to pull back and lean into my family life. I'm leaving on Wednesday to go on a 6-day trip with our boat out to the Lake Havasu. Right? I don't know if you know where Havasu is. So here I am working my butt off. I'm doing 6 podcasts while I'm in Vegas. I'm speaking on stage tomorrow. I had 2 meetings yesterday, 1 on Saturday. So I'm like, this is one of my busiest trips ever. No family time at all. So if you look at me in this snapshot, I'm out of alignment because I'm completely working away from my family and I don't see my kids at all. It'll be 4 days that I've away from my children, right? It would have been 4 days away from wifey too, but she's coming out. However, on Wednesday, I'm going to switch back the other direction. I'm going to be unreachable in my businesses. I'm going to put all my businesses on the back burner, and my family will have my undivided attention for the next 6 days out on the lake. So it's awareness that matters. And what I always tell people to do is you need to audit your work-life balance like you do any other category. People have KPIs and metrics for measuring everything that matters in business, and nobody really looks at their quality of their life and makes that a metric to measure as well. And so I am aware on a monthly basis of, I look backwards for 30 days and say, where have I been spending my time? And if it's too much with the family, then I got to put it more into my business, because naturally I want to just be a stay-at-home dad and not work at all. Like naturally I just want to go play with my kids at the beach and go surf with them and, not do any work at all. But there are certain seasons where my work requires 100% of my attention and my family gets none of it. So there's no way to stay balanced forever is what I'm trying to say, I guess. And it's just trying to keep within the range of between the 10 and 2, as I said in that little analogy, and being aware. Let's just say that the 10 is too much work and the 2 is too much family. When you get to the 10, it's time to slow down on the work and get a little bit more family time. On purpose, cancel a meeting and take your wife out to lunch. On purpose, take half the day off and take your kids to Disneyland. I live 20 minutes from Disneyland. So there will be times where I realize I've been grinding and I literally see my kids for 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes at night right now. This is like I have a job, and this is not why I started businesses. I wanted freedom. And so ultimately I'll take a day off of work and just take them to Disneyland, pull them out of school, and just give them my undivided attention. So it's like having muscles. It's a perishable skill. Being balanced is perishable. If you're not working on it constantly, you will be out of balance instantly.
Well, thank you. I am definitely going to start measuring my time and looking backwards at where I've been spending my time. We're going to wrap this up, and I'm going to put you on the spot here. I'm going to ask you 2 questions. What is the best advice you have ever received?
Everything happens for a reason.
What's the worst advice you've ever received?
Don't pay your taxes.
Somebody told you not to pay your taxes?
Well, somebody told me I didn't have to pay taxes on certain income, and I found out that I did, and then I was late and had penalties, and it was like triple what it should have been.
Oh, man.
That's the first one that came to mind. I'm dealing with that now. It's a real estate transaction, and anyway, long story short, pay your taxes. Worst advice I've ever been given? Shoot. That's the first time probably I've ever been asked that question. I don't think anyone's given me bad advice like maliciously, where they're like telling me to do something that would harm me.
Well, I'm not saying maliciously, but that didn't follow, like that didn't align with your morals, I guess I should say.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of that, man. I'm pretty balanced as far as doing in alignment with my morals and my value system. But yeah, I would say that the best piece of advice is that everything happens for a reason, and the worst piece of advice I can give somebody is to wait. I think that's probably it, is to wait. A lot of people have desires, they have goals, they have ambitions, and I think that a lot of people wait because they're either scared, fear of failure, who knows what it is. And I think that waiting is the worst thing that anyone can ever do. You have to take massive action. You have to create momentum in everything in life, in your romantic life, in your personal life, in your professional life. You got to have momentum. You got to take massive action. And I think that waiting is a terrible thing to do. So although no one's ever said wait, I think that would be a bad piece of advice.
Yeah. Well, thank you, man.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you. I appreciate your time. And you guys heard it. Take action now. So you can end up like this guy, changing people's lives.
There we go.
I appreciate you for joining me, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, let's go back to the event.
Yeah, let's go.
All right, sweet.